This episode and every episode is sponsored by my company, JDAQA Software Testing. We're your one-stop shop for manual, automated, performance, and security testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the First Customer Podcast, hosted by Jay Agner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Marcus Blair, the founder and CEO of Omega. Marcus, thanks for joining me, buddy.
Oh, no problem. I love being on podcasts. Really appreciate you.
Awesome, man. You could definitely you win for the coolest accent so far. And I'm from Virginia, so, it's been beaten out of me a little bit, but, I love a good Southern accent. So I'm already
What part of Virginia?
Near Williamsburg, but kind of like middle of nowhere near Williamsburg.
So I lived in Charlottesville.
Okay. All right. So you were really in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So I lived in Charlottesville. I moved up to Charlottesville, and everyone there was like, "Oh, you talk so country." And I'd say that the way I usually speak, this isn't country. If I really turn on, I can really talk country if I need to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Depending on the crowd. That's good to have in your back pocket. It still slips in when I go home. My wife is like, "Who are you?" She's like, she doesn't know who I am when I'm ordering food down there. So where did you grow up, man? Where'd you start off at?
I am from Knoxville, Tennessee, actually just outside of Knoxville in a little town called Loudon, Tennessee. I think my high school graduating class had 60 or 70 people in it.
Okay. And then where'd you go from there? I saw you at ITT. Is that where you went from? Did you do that down there or somewhere else?
Yeah, I went to school at ITT Tech, found out that they weren't accredited.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my electrical engineering degree, but I went to go to grad school, and UT wouldn't let me in because I didn't have an accredited degree. So then I went to Tusculum, and I got a second undergrad degree in accounting.
Okay. Why electrical engineering? Was there anybody in your family that did that, or what was the drive?
My dad was a maintenance man who worked in automotive manufacturing plants his entire career. And he loved the idea of us learning to work with our hands. So if you remember back in the late 90s, ITT, they had all of these commercials about with lasers and doing all this type of thing. And so that's how we ended up at ITT Tech. And there were only two choices. You either went into CAD or you went into electrical engineering. So I went with electrical engineering. Okay.
And then what did you do after you did the degree? Did you like it? Is that what you wanted to do? Or did you kind of want to take a different path from there?
I liked it just fine. But for me, engineering is a learned behavior. I'm analytical, so the math wasn't all that challenging, and applying formulas to abstract things, all that was comfortable for me. But if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't have gone into engineering. Later in my career, when I was working at various automotive places, I would meet the engineers who were, popped out of the womb as engineers, that died in the wool engineers. And I realized there was a significant gap between me and them because they had skills, and just the way they thought was even further along the logical analytical curve than I was. I probably would have went into like finance or maybe even economics. I really loved that world. And maybe I might have gone to law school.
Okay. Well, you said you went for business and accounting. Or was it just business? What was it? Business accounting? What was the Tusculum? What'd you get for it?
It's a bachelor's of business with a concentration in accounting.
Okay. And is that seems like a little bit of a switch from electrical engineering. So after all this kind of different stuff, what was the plan? Did you have a plan when you were done with that degree?
No, not really. So I wanted to go back because at the time I was very motivated to go to grad school. At the very least, I wanted to go get an MBA. I flirted with the idea of going to law school. But if I went to law school, I wanted to be a patent attorney. I learned that I couldn't sit for the patent bar with my current degree because it wasn't accredited. I didn't want to do like divorce or child custody or any of that type of stuff. Right. So law school kind of got scrapped. When I finished my accounting degree, I was actually recruited out of the engineering department where I was working at the time at JTech Automotive, because the the corporate accounting department, they were having to approve these capital budgets. These engineers would come in, they'd be like, oh, we need $500,000. We're going to buy these machines and it's going to do all these wonderful things. Well, the accountants didn't understand what they were talking about, as far as the improvements and like cycle time or scrap reduction and all this type of stuff, because the engineers weren't talking in dollars and cents. They were talking in engineering speak.
Right.
He recruited me into the corporate engineering department to act as a liaison. The engineers would come in and they would pitch the stuff to me because I knew all those words, right? Mm-hmm. I could listen to it and say, oh, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense. And it was also my job to follow up with them to make sure everything that they actually pitched came to pass, and then update the budgets for the following year. So if they were going to buy a machine that was going to eliminate 2 people and it was supposed to be finished in 6 months, 6 months from the time we said, okay, go, it was my job to go out to the floor and actually make sure it delivered on what it said it was going to. And so that I ended up working in an accounting department for a year and change.
And was that right out of school?
No, so I my first job out of school was at Denso. I worked at Denso Manufacturing in the engineering department. I bounced around different tasks and assignments in there. New products, current products, manual, automated processes, all these types of things. And then I went to JTech. When I went to JTech, I got the accounting degree. So I left the engineering department at JTech and moved into the accounting department.
Yeah, that's a pretty big switch from kind of hands-on electrical, or even just the theoretical electrical engineering stuff to the accounting world. Did you embrace the? By the way, everybody says to me, I tell everybody I love running a business. I love it so much, and they say even the finance part, and they say except the finance part. I hate the accounting and the finance part. So did you embrace the accounting world? Were you kind of like, this is going to be my career from now on?
I never wanted to do the debits and credits accounting stuff, but the thing that gets overlooked about accounting is that if you understand accounting and you can read a financial statement and you understand the chart of accounts in your QuickBooks, you understand business. That all accounting does is track how money moves through your business. That's what it does. So if you understand it, then you have a much better understanding of how your business works. Right. I embrace that part of it, but as far as doing all that debits and credits and creating all those statements, that's for others.
Right. Okay. That's fair. That's fair. So what happened after that? You kind of jumped over in the accounting realm, and how long did you stay there, and what was kind of next after that?
So I was there for a year or a little more than a year, and then I was recruited to another company, commercial vehicle group. And at this point, my career, when I left engineering and I went into accounting, I really learned the value of having a good boss. My accounting boss, her name was Becky Hawkins. She was absolutely wonderful. And I learned so much from working with her, and it kind of prepared me for my next role. So I left JTech and I became a general manager of digital transformation. So I was over a data analytics program for 14 plants around the world. And it was our job to modernize processes. So we would go into these plants, we would roll out new softwares, or, we would do like IoT projects where we were putting sensors on things to track data, track performance. This company had been built primarily by acquisition. So there were a lot of disparate systems, disparate cultures, language barriers, and other just confounding factors. And it was very difficult in some of these plants to have a good idea of what was happening, from headquarters, let's say. And we were in the process of building all of these things out. We were about to start putting up data warehouses and things when COVID happened.
I can't. Timeline of COVID in real life doesn't seem like it matches, but so that wasn't that long ago. I mean, that was a couple of years ago, I guess. Yeah.
So I lost my job. I worked at CVG for 2.5 years, and then I lost my job in June 2020 during COVID. So, March was COVID's big kickoff. And so in June, I was out of a job. And 2019, professionally speaking, 2019 was an awesome year for me. We nailed some big projects at work. I got great marks on my annual review. I landed on Knoxville's 40 under 40 list in 2019. So going into 2020, like I was kind of riding the crest of a wave and, all these, like, we're going to do all these great things. And then, 60 days later,
You're like, nothing on earth will knock me down from this.
yeah, right.
There's nothing I can foresee that would end this run I'm on. So, it sounds like your automation background is not a mistake that you carried into Omega, right? I mean, it sounds like something you kind of have done throughout your career. So talk to me about where Omega came from and, what's the story of how that got started?
Okay, so Omega came from a eureka moment one spring, probably spring of 2019. We were, we're trying to develop all this stuff, this data collection. So we're reaching out to vendors, and we had, I don't remember exactly which vendor this was, but they told me on the phone, and this person, I remember I'm like GM director level, like I can sign POs, I have budget. We're an $850 million a year business or $800 million a year business, publicly traded. We're not a small company.
Mm-hmm.
However, compared to other international manufacturers, we're a very small company. Right? The VP for this supplier, he's a VP of sales for the Southeastern United States, told me that our project was not worth his time. He only wanted to work with OEMs, which in the Southeast, that's like BMW in South Carolina, Nissan in Nashville, or Volkswagen in Chattanooga, the major OEMs, or tier one suppliers, because if it wasn't a 2-year project where he could bill, 5-10 engineers for 2 years, he just didn't even want to fool with it. And I hung up the phone that day and I sat back in my chair and I was like, we're not a small business. If we're getting turned away like that and we're publicly traded almost $1 billion a year, what's happening at, say, $200 million a year, $100 million a year, $20 million a year? And so I started looking into it. And much to my surprise and kind of dismay, I learned that most of the benefits of the digital transformation, this little world that I spent all of my time in, for the most part, the benefits are all confined to the upper, say, 5% of companies in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the world, we're still fighting with VLOOKUP formulas and sum if stuff in Excel. Well, meanwhile, these guys at the very, very top have all of these like mega software packages that do everything except fix their coffee in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
That disparity to me is a real problem, because there are so many benefits to be had from modern architecture and modern software. But for some reason, these smaller companies, they just can't, they can't take advantage of it.
When you say digital transformation, sorry, I was going to say, that's a term that's thrown around a lot. What does that mean to you?
Digital transformation. So there's two flavors, right? And they're different things. You have digital optimization and you have digital transformation. Digital optimization is using modern digital tools, whether it's cloud computing, software packages, whatever the case may be, but modern digital tools to optimize processes in your business to run faster and more efficiently, right? Digital transformation is kind of digital optimization taken 2 or 3 years down the line, or some period of time. It may not be 2 or 3 years, depends on the company. But anyway, sometime down the line, when digital tools become so integrated with your culture that that they've changed the way you do business, and they might have even produced new revenue streams for you. Mm-hmm. But it's a fundamental change in the way that you work, right? So it's not doing what you do better. That's optimization. Doing what you do in an entirely new way to the point where it's almost a new business with new revenue streams. That is transformation.
Got it. That's a great delineation there too. I don't think I've heard the breakout there of optimization versus transformation. And what do you guys do at Omega? Is it both?
So at Omega, in terms of optimization or transformation, we probably spend more of our time on the optimization piece because you have to start there. No one can start out and say, I'm going to transform my business, right? But they might say, I'm going to optimize this or that, okay? Think about it in terms of someone who wants to get in shape. They don't start out and say, I'm going to change my whole lifestyle, right? They're going to say, oh, I'm going to start eating healthier. And then I'm going to exercise. And then now I'm going to drink more water. Now I'm going to make sure I get to sleep. I get more sleep. Oh, now I'm really serious. So I'm going to get a gym membership. And you keep down this path until you make all these different changes. 6 months later or a year later, you might have an entirely different lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Maybe through all this stuff, you discovered you liked running. So now you're running 4 half marathons a year or something. So, you're going through this training and this stuff. You've made a lifestyle change, but you did it through accumulating smaller changes.
Right.
So you can't set out and say, we're going to start our digital transformation today. And the executive pounds on the table and goes, oh, bring us a digital transformation guy and you do the digital transformation things. It doesn't work that way. You've got to start with something, with a quick win that gets you a good ROI, and you got to kick the snowball. And once it starts rolling, then you can transform your business.
Very interesting. So what was the genesis from your eureka moment when you realized there was this disparity between kind of enterprise level and the rest of the world and starting this business to address that problem?
Oh man, I got laid off. That was the genesis.
That'll kick you in the right direction.
It kick you out of the nest. I got laid off in June, and I kind of took the month of July off and cycled a lot and pedaled around and tried to figure out what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just kind of nominally sent out a few resumes and whatnot. And it's like, I don't really want to do that. And so September the 1st, and in August, I decided I was going to try to go into business for myself, partially because I couldn't get an interview anywhere. And I still had, food. I had to buy groceries and stuff. And so September the 1st, I started the business that grew into Omega Digital. And I did not realize how insular of a world that I lived in, right? When I was working at CVG, I worked with IT guys, I worked with engineers, I worked with, some very, very smart people. But we were all in this one little world, where we could just walk around saying things like, oh, just run a query against a SQL database and grab it with Power BI and post it to SharePoint. You say that stuff in a chamber of commerce and people's eyes just like glass over and they're like, computer stuff.
Right.
I had no idea how to talk to people. I had no idea how to network. There was so much I had to learn, so many soft skills that you need as an entrepreneur that I just didn't have. And when I had the opportunity, when I had the job title and I had a bit of a platform, I should have used my platform to build a network on LinkedIn while I could sign POs and things. Because people would have been like, oh, I want to talk to this guy. He could be a leader. He could do this. He could do that. Now I'm just Marcus Blair, some guy. No one cares. No one will talk to me. Mm-hmm. So in hindsight, that's one thing I wish I would have done. But learning how to navigate LinkedIn and, all of these other things, I don't think I actually made any money that entire year for the next 4 or 5 months. I went to a lot of pointless networking meetings, that's for sure. And just, you're just kind of like floundering around trying to find a way.
Right. Well, that's a great, I love that. I love that point so much because you hear a lot of people that have these grand ideas about a business or a product they're going to start, but they think it's going to happen after their current job. Right. They're like, oh, I'll do, things are good here. I'm going to be fine. And then blah, blah, blah. And I think it's a real cheat code to use some of that time and use some of that authority, like you said, to build your network. That's a great point. I haven't heard anybody say that. But building that network where you got that platform is a great idea.
You can start putting out content. You can start building an audience. And the thing is, you have content to build, right? Because you have things to talk about because, you know, I was flying back and forth to Mexico and back and forth to Europe, and we're doing projects all over the States for all these different types of programs, and we're meeting with vendors and all this. The only thing you really have to clear is their policies for what you can post on LinkedIn.
Right.
But if people see that you're active and you're doing stuff and you say, oh, we tried this and it didn't work, so maybe you should think about that, those types of posts, people will engage with those.
Yeah.
Right? And because they can relate to them, they're relevant. When you're just some guy tossing stuff on LinkedIn, you know, hashtag daily grind or something, no one cares.
When you start to establish yourself as an expert, you kind of get to do that with the backdrop of whatever your company is at the time. I love that advice. Well, how did you get your first customer? And they don't have to name any names, but how did you get your first customer after you started Omega?
So my first real customer, which actually I'm going to talk about my second real customer.
Sure. Yeah.
Because this is something else that I think people who are going into business themselves, something they need to be wary of and careful of. I ran into this guy. He was a business development manager for a company, and I met him at a random retail store, and he had a table set up and he's talking about his products or whatever. We get to talking and he tells us, oh, we need this particular piece of software. I was like, we can build software. Here's a card. Well, 2 weeks later they called. I was like, oh, okay. I was so excited to talk to these guys because, you know, there's a decent sized company, not huge. They're talking like 15 million a year. So it's like big company. It's got multiple locations. They want us to build this software. I'm like, oh yeah, we can do this. And I was so eager. I didn't write a contract. I didn't write a scope of work. I didn't do a lot of things that I should have done because I was so excited to close. I was like, oh, we're going to do this thing. And my mind is already 6 months down the road. Okay, we're going to build this thing. We're going to build this for them. And it's going to be great because, you know, we do great stuff. And then we'll have this product. And then this time next year, we're going to go to market with this product. And, you know, I'm way down the line. And we get in there and we start slinging code, right? We start writing user stories. We start doing wireframes. We start building stuff and everything's going good. Well, fast forward 6 months and the client just breached the contract. They just breached the contract and left me with a bill for $30,000. And I get this nastygram from their attorney that's like, oh, you committed fraud and all these other scary words because they said the software that we built didn't work. What do you mean it didn't work? You've been using it for 4 months. I've got all these log files in AWS that shows you've been using this. It shows every transaction, every click you've ever done. You've been using this. Because what I didn't understand at the time is they weren't actually accusing me of fraud. They had just changed their mind.
Right.
And didn't want to do with the project anymore. So they sent me a scary letter. Oh, we're going to sue you because you did it. They just wanted out, right? They had no intention of taking this to court. And this was in 2021. Courts are backed up. So even if I had countersued or whatever, you're looking at 2 years.
Yeah.
Probably before you get it resolved. This whole thing is going to be long and drug out. And they know this.
Mm-hmm.
I have no paperwork to fall back on. Like no contract, no scope of work. I mean, I say no. I did have something, but it was not substantial, right? It was not, it might have held up in court, might have, but we did have a choice. There was no way that I was getting my money out.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how we concluded our first year in business, with me writing off $30,000 of bad debt. And now, not only do we have a $30,000 bill we're not getting paid for, we have no business plan. Mm-hmm. This was our business plan because we're developing this product, we're taking it to market. This was the business plan.
Right.
Now we have to transform, not to go back to that word again, but I really hate the word pivot. I try to avoid it. But we have to transform from a software development firm into a services company. And that was essentially starting over. That was starting over, new business, new model, new customer acquisition, that all of these things that we thought we had sorted out. And I will say this to anybody who's listening into your podcast, it is much cheaper to pay the lawyers in advance. Pay them to do the preventative work so you don't have to pay them to represent you.
Yep.
If you pay them to represent you, it will easily be twice the cost. And you'll be going into this, and in your mind, you're going to be doing these mental gymnastics. Oh, these guys are nice. I can trust them. No, you can't. Okay. And it's not because they're bad people, but you can't trust them. You can't trust anyone. Write it down in a binding contract, get proper signatures, have it properly documented. If they're trustworthy people, they're not going to mind. And if they're nefarious people, well, at least you have something you can fall back on.
Yeah. That's a hell of a second customer story.
Right.
How did you get your first customer after you made that change and you guys went to a service-based company from a product company? Like, how did you, or a product delivery company, whatever you consider yourself? What was that process like? So
the way that we got that customer, and basically the way that we received every customer after that, has all been the same. It's been through referrals. We didn't double down and have any intentionality behind it until the past couple of weeks, actually. But one thing that Omega has always done well, we've always had excellent client retention, and we've always had an excellent lifetime value. Our clients who do one product with us, they tend to come back, one project with us, they tend to come back and do another one. And then whenever people need those services and they're just talking, they'll refer us to someone else. We're a technology company, right? We had one of our clients come and ask us to make one-pagers for their conference in California because they liked working with us and they didn't like their marketing company. We had one other company ask us to build them a website, just a WordPress website, because they liked working with us.
Right.
We have basically lived off referrals ever since we had to make that change to being services.
Okay. Wow. And no outbound, no inbound, just referrals.
We tried various forms of marketing, and honestly, all I've accomplished with the money that I've spent on marketing up to this point is just setting it on fire. We have tried LinkedIn outreach, we've tried email, cold calling, like you name it, we've tried it. But there were some things that we didn't understand about our client, all of which I've alluded to up to this point. I mentioned before what an insular world that I lived in when talking about digital transformation and SQL. And this isn't something you can put on a billboard and have people be like, oh, I need that, and have just pick up the phone and call you. That is not how this industry works. Therefore, most mass outreach messages are going to be unsuccessful.
Mm-hmm.
I should have drawn that conclusion based off the knowledge I already had, but instead I just decided to, torch $5,000 on a SEO campaign. And then that was like, oh, this didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
What we've had to do is basically accept our position in the marketplace as being a niche provider, and then figure out who we could communicate to that understood that niche.
Right. And so does some of that, do you think after you've kind of continued to hone in on that customer that you'll have more success with any of those methods? Or do you think that it's just such a specific offering that those routes won't work for you?
Mass routes are not going to work for us.
Okay.
I think that, I should say that with a few caveats. Mass routes won't work for us right now. They will maybe 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. In my estimation, the U.S. is behind Europe probably 5 years in terms of automation and low-code adoption. There are many companies like mine in Europe and even in other parts of the world, but not so much here. As that gap closes, then it will be easier to communicate in mass
Mhm.
the general public, just because they will be more educated on it.
Right. That makes sense.
I mean, even with, you take something as simple as CRM adoption. Let's say CRMs have exploded in the past 10 years,
Mhm.
15 years, probably going back that far. But we're not even a critical mass yet. I think, and I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think it's less than 30% of all businesses use CRM right now. And even with the amount of growth you've seen in that space, we're not even a critical mass yet, right?
Right.
We still have quite a few customers. In fact, I have a sales call with a nonprofit consulting firm tomorrow that runs all of their business off of an Excel spreadsheet. I mean, still, even now.
Right.
As that closes, it will create more opportunities for us.
Yeah, people know. Yeah, that makes sense. People will be more aware of just your types of service in general. So, what is your niche with Omega? If there's other, optimization, but automation companies, business process automation companies, and digital transformation companies, who do you guys attack? What's your niche?
You mean as far as what vertical we serve?
Sure, yeah, or whatever. What differentiates you guys from another firm that would do the same thing?
Okay, so that's actually a lot easier to answer. There are several other firms that do similar things to what we do. We have several competitive advantages. Number one, those firms tend to pigeonhole themselves. You will have an RPA company, let's say, and they'll work with UiPath or Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, one of these guys, and they're really good at RPA. Or you might have a software development firm that, we do AWS, we do Google Cloud, whatever. You might have another firm that specializes in some other thing. The problem with that is that's all they do. So they have a very deep knowledge base and they have a very deep history in that knowledge base, but they're not really that familiar with the rest of the things on the board. When they go talk to a client, that's what they're trying to sell. Whatever the problem is, they are trying to sell RPA or they're trying to sell AWS because this is what they do. This is what they know. That's not always the right solution for that client. But that's not even, it's not even limited to just this, business process improvement that we're talking about. You see this, across the spectrum. People that sell CRMs, they're a HubSpot shop. They client that uses Zoho or Salesforce or something. What's the first thing they do? Oh, you need to change the HubSpot. Do they actually need to change the HubSpot? Or what they're trying to do is get that client into a world that they're more familiar with. Like they are bending the client to their needs instead of adjusting to the client needs.
Mm-hmm.
If the client CRM is working, you really shouldn't tell them to change it. I find that disingenuous.
Right. Yeah.
We use the simplest tool available for the job. RPA is great. It's not the solution for everything. APIs are great. They're not the solution for everything. Custom software is great. It's not the solution for everything.
All right. So why don't we, longevity is something that I've been working on. I got 5 kids, so I'm trying to be around for them as long as possible. What are 3 things you're doing to increase your longevity, your health, just overall as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I can totally understand that. Like my little monster just turned 14 and graduated the 8th grade. And
wow, congratulations.
No one in this world is more important to me. So what am I doing to hang around longer? I need to get more sleep, right? Probably every entrepreneur is going to be like, I need to get, X hours of sleep a night. And somehow that doesn't happen. So that's a goal. And I really love bourbon, right? Because, this is the Southeast, you have like Tennessee whiskey, Kentucky bourbon. It's a whole thing down here, right? So I had to cut back on all of that. You had to cut back on the bourbon a little bit and wine. Love wine too. Cut those things back. And I was training to get back to half marathon. So I really like halves. I've ran a couple of fulls. I've ran a couple of halves. I wanted to run a half again by the end of the year. Only now I'm like 42 and I spend all of my time like trying to define the proper sales funnel, like who is my client and all this type of stuff. So those are 3 things that I've done here lately. Sleep, less alcohol, go for a run.
You look great, 42, brother. When you said 14-year-old kid, I was surprised. Mine is, I call my oldest, who's just about to graduate high school, call him my college experiment, because I had him when I was 19. So I've got a bunch, in between now and then, but I certainly can appreciate wanting to be there for them. Well, this was great. Let's wrap it here. How do people find you? How do people find Omega? I'll put everything in the notes of the video and the podcast. But how do people find you?
Yeah, we're really active on LinkedIn. That's really the only platform that we use right now. So you can find me on LinkedIn /Marcus at Omega, and then Omega Digital Solutions page. That's where we post everything. We have several events coming up. If you're around the Southeast, and look for stuff in Nashville, look for stuff in Greenville, South Carolina, and down in Columbus, Georgia. We'll be doing stuff there over the summer. So we would love to see you guys come out.
Awesome, man. I always ask people that are from, well, I guess it's not Nashville. Is it New York? Is it Nashville or Knoxville?
I'm in Knoxville.
Okay, because I keep Nate Bargatze is one of our favorite comedians. He's from Nashville. So anybody that's from Tennessee, I always ask if they know about Nate Bargatze. Yeah, I guess he's the second Tennessee kid. The real one, I think, is what's his name? Justin Timberlake is a Tennessee kid or something. But
really?
That's what I heard. I didn't know this till recently, but apparently that's his nickname. So
yeah, well, little known fact: Usher was actually born in Tennessee. He's born in Chattanooga.
Well, he's probably the Tennessee kid. He's got
Knoxville, Quentin Tarantino.
Wow, you guys are steep. I didn't know Johnny Knoxville. Did he change his name because he was from Knoxville? I didn't know that.
I don't know if he did I don't know if he did or he didn't, but he's local here. And of course, the patron saint of East Tennessee is Dolly Parton.
Oh, of course, yes. It's the great Dolly Parton. All right, man. Well, this was awesome. You were fantastic. I hope people check you out and learn a couple things from your journey. So thank you for being on, and we'll catch up again soon. All right.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Marcus. If you enjoyed this week's episode of the First Customer Podcast, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It's free and it really helps us out. See you next week.